In the mid-2000s, Quentin Tarantino faced the biggest challenge of his career. After the failure of Grindhouse, his confidence was shaken, and he debated his next move. Then, he took a gamble that could have ended his career. He returned to an old script he had struggled to crack for years, one so ambitious it felt impossible to pull off. And if he failed, it might be the end of his career as a filmmaker, or at least one with the power and autonomy to direct his own scripts. But instead of playing it safe, Tarantino doubled down on his vision, risking everything on a film that could either cement his legacy or derail it for good. To see how he did it, let's dive in and take a look at how Quentin Tarantino bet his career on Inglourious Basterds. When comparing himself to David Fincher, director of Fight Club and The Social Network, Tarantino called him one of the most talented filmmakers of his generation, but stressed that Fincher wasn't in the same category as him because Tarantino wrote his own films, whereas Fincher directed other writers' scripts. Tarantino would go on to say that the glory in what he does is the fact that it starts with a blank piece of paper, and that if his mother never met his father, Inglourious Basterds wouldn't exist in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it almost didn't exist at all. Tarantino first began writing Inglourious Basterds with a simple idea, his own take on the Dirty Dozen. He had always loved the guys on a mission genre, and one of his favorite films from the 70s, Inglourious Basterds, further fueled his inspiration. But rather than just playing homage, he wanted to craft a war movie unlike any other. Drawing from real history, he based the story on Operation Greenup, a daring OSS mission in 1945 that involved Jewish American soldiers and defected Germans infiltrating Nazi territory. One of its key operatives, Franz Weber, former Austrian Wehrmacht officer who switched sides, served as the direct inspiration for Sergeant Hugo Stiglitz. With this blend of classic war movie tropes and real-life espionage, Tarantino set out to create something ambitious, though he had no idea just how difficult it would be to finish. Tarantino originally intended Inglourious Basterds to be his follow-up to Jackie Brown, but the script quickly spiraled out of control. Instead of struggling with writer's block, he had the opposite problem. He couldn't stop writing. The draft exploded to nearly 300 pages, with Tarantino calling it some of the best work he had ever done. Shosanna was also a far more action-driven character in this earlier version of the film, resembling a pulpy Joan of Arc-style vigilante on a mission. Instead of running a cinema, she spent the film hunting down Nazis one by one, crossing names off a list like Beatrice Kiddo in Kill Bill, and even sniping officers from the rooftops of Paris. Unfortunately, Tarantino couldn't figure out the ending. As the story kept growing beyond his original vision, he started to worry that he had lost control of it. Adding to his frustration, other filmmakers were already redefining the World War II genre. Steven Spielberg was Saving Private Ryan, and Terrence Malick with The Thin Red Line. As Tarantino struggled to crack Inglourious Basterds, he unexpectedly found himself pivoting to an entirely different project. At a party, he ran into Uma Thurman, who reminded him about Kill Bill, an idea they had come up with together while filming Pulp Fiction. Intrigued, Tarantino dug out the few pages he had written years earlier and decided to run with it. What was meant to be a fun, small-scale project quickly morphed into an epic of its own, forcing him to put Inglourious Basterds on the back burner. Riding high after Kill Bill, Quentin Tarantino joined forces with his longtime friend, fellow filmmaker Robert Rodriguez to create Grindhouse, a double feature designed to recreate the raw, low-budget charm of the exploitation films Tarantino grew up watching in the 70s. The project featured two films, one directed by each filmmaker, packed with intentional imperfections like missing reels, scratchy film stock, choppy editing, and over-the-top performances, all in the spirit of classic Grindhouse cinema. Between the features, audiences were treated to hilariously outrageous fake trailers for non-existent movies. Despite its creative ambition, Grindhouse proved to be a flop. General audiences struggled to grasp the concept, and its extended runtime hurt its box office, limiting the number of screenings that could be held in a day. Executive producer Harvey Weinstein said that he was so incredibly disappointed with the film's opening weekend that he was considering re-releasing it as two separate films and possibly adding back the missing scenes. Rodriguez was undeterred by the film's failure and continued making Grindhouse-style movies, finding moderate success with projects like Machete, which was spun off from one of the film's fake trailers. Tarantino, on the other hand, found himself at a career crossroads as Hollywood began aggressively offering him scripts for big projects to direct, like Green Lantern, thinking he was desperate enough to finally take on someone else's script in an effort to revive his career. Unsure of his next move, Tarantino reached out to Tony Scott, who had directed his True Romance script, and Steven Spielberg for advice. Both filmmakers reassured him, telling Tarantino that he had been lucky to experience success with every film up to that point, almost like playing the game without ever having to pay for it. Grindhouse had finally been his wake-up call, but rather than seeing it as a defeat, Spielberg framed it as a valuable lesson, one that would make his next success even sweeter. Though the failure shook his confidence, Tarantino ultimately decided not to direct someone else's script. Instead, he debated returning returning to Inglourious Basterds, a project he had struggled to crack for years. The sheer scope of it felt like an overwhelming mountain to climb, and he worried he still wouldn't be able to get it right. But Eleanor Coppola, wife of Francis Ford Coppola, offered him a blunt piece of advice. He was still young, and if he kept putting it off, it would only get harder with time. Taking her words to heart, Tarantino finally committed to finishing Inglourious Basterds, determined to solve its challenges once and for all. However, as he sat down writing it, he realized that much of Shosanna's original characterization, her relentless pursuit of vengeance, her kill list, and her methodical hunting of Nazis had been mined for the bride in Kill Bill. This forced him to completely rethink her character, stripping away the pulpier elements and reshaping her into a more grounded and realistic figure, making her less of an assassin and more of a survivor navigating a world of danger. As Inglourious Basterds continued to grow beyond his control, Tarantino struggled to rein it in. His solution? Turn it into a miniseries. For a while, that seemed like the best path forward, until a conversation with French filmmaker Luc Besson, director of The Fifth Element, changed everything. Over dinner, Tarantino excitedly pitched his idea for an Inglourious Basterds miniseries, but Besson wasn't impressed. "You are one of the only filmmakers who makes me want to leave the house," he told Tarantino, "and I'm disappointed." The comment hit harder than Tarantino expected, and he couldn't shake it. It was the wake-up call he needed, pushing him to abandon the miniseries approach and take one final shot at making Inglourious Basterds the film he had always dreamed of. That's when Tarantino came up with a new storyline about the premiere of a German propaganda film, which lit a fuse under him, as he would keep the first two chapters of a script, the dairy farm and introduction to the Bastards, and completely rewrite the rest. He would later call the dairy farm scene his favorite thing he's ever written. As Inglourious Basterds neared its climax, Tarantino hit a major roadblock: what to do with Hitler. Sticking to historical accuracy felt predictable, and the idea of using a body double or having him escape at the back of the theater seemed cheap. Then, in a late-night writing session at 4 a.m, he had a thought: why not just kill him? He grabbed a piece of paper, scribbled "just effing kill him," and went to bed. And if he still liked the idea in the morning, he'd go with it. When he woke up the next morning and saw what he'd written, he realized it wasn't just a wild, sleep-deprived idea, it was the key to unlocking the entire film. Up until that point, he'd assumed he needed to honor history, but then it hit him. His characters don't know they're a part of history. To them, this wasn't a preordained event. It was the present moment, unfolding in real time. And since his characters were fictional, history didn't have to dictate their actions. In their world, this could have happened. With that breakthrough, Tarantino threw out historical constraints and embraced a bold new direction. The Bastards wouldn't just fight Nazis, they would rewrite history. Tarantino has never been one to play by the rules when it comes to music in his films, and Inglourious Basterds was no exception. Rather than strictly using period-accurate songs, he made the bold choice to include David Bowie's Cat People, a track from the 1980s, in a World War II setting. For Tarantino, it was about using the right song to elevate a moment. He'd always loved Cat People, but was frustrated that director Paul Schrader had relegated it to the end credits of the film it was written for. At Video Archives, where he worked as a young film geek, he and his friends would lament how wasted the song felt. So when the opportunity arose, he did what Schrader hadn't. He built an entire sequence around it, making it one of the most memorable needle drops of his career. Casting Hans Landa was one of the biggest challenges Tarantino faced while making the film. The role required a linguistic genius, someone who could effortlessly switch between German, French, and English, while maintaining a chilling yet charismatic presence. Tarantino initially considered Leonardo DiCaprio for the part, but ultimately decided Landa had to be played by a native German speaker to ensure authenticity. "I wanted Germans playing Germans speaking German," he told The Times. But finding someone who not only spoke fluent German but could also deliver Landa's dialogue, filled with poetic quality and sharp comedic timing, proved nearly impossible. As time ran out, Tarantino grew increasingly worried. Without the perfect Landa, there was no movie. He was prepared to cancel the project rather than cast someone who couldn't bring the character to life. With just 1 week left before he had to make a decision, Christoph Waltz walked into the audition and changed everything. Returning to Inglourious Basterds was the boldest gamble of Tarantino's career. He was stepping back into a project he had struggled with for years, tackling a genre he had never fully explored, and making choices that could have easily backfired. Rewriting history, using modern music in a period piece, casting an unknown actor as the film's most pivotal character, and delivering an unconventional war movie unlike anything Hollywood had seen before. But in the end, every risk paid off. Inglourious Basterds didn't just revitalize his career after the failure of Grindhouse, it cemented his status as one of the most daring, original, and commercially successful filmmakers of his generation. Nearly matching the cultural impact of Pulp Fiction, it became his highest-grossing film, and proved once again that Tarantino thrived not by playing it safe, but by taking the kind of risks that most filmmakers wouldn't dare. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content.